In the last 2 to 3 years, we also noticed that there was a huge rise in digital wallets.
With the impact of the pandemic, there's a growing preference of contactless payment methods, especially to reduce the risk of physical contact, further accelerating the widespread adoptions of digital payments.
I think we caught on really quickly with the convenience of contactless cards. That consumer preference drove increased acceptance.
Hello and welcome to Connected. I'm Divya Gopalan. Ever walk into a coffee shop for a quick pick-me-up only to be told that your cash is no good here? Without a payment app or a digital wallet, you may have to wait for that caffeine fix. More and more countries are looking to go cashless, making the field of financial technology or fintech flourish. Now, the global digital payments market is projected to grow by more than 32% in revenue this year, hitting the $100 billion mark. To help us better understand the pace of digital payments adoption in Asia, we're joined by Steven Chuang of TapPay. He's the founder and CEO of Cherri Tech. The company's software platform TapPay was Apple Pay's first partner in Taiwan back in 2017. And we also have Jolyn Tay in Singapore. She's the general manager of CardUp and recognized as one of the top 65 women in fintech of 2023. Thank you both so much for joining us. It is great to finally have this conversation with you two. I want to start with the basics. Steven, let's think back maybe 5 years for you as a consumer. How much has changed in terms of digital payment here in Taiwan?
So I'm Steven, founder at the TapPay. So TapPay is a payment platform for the SMBs. We specialize in e-commerce merchants as well as the physical merchants. So what I see that in the past 3 to 5 years, Taiwan digital payment scene has been booming. So thanks to tech getting better and people change how the way they pay, all kind of digital payment options are everywhere now.
Indeed, and I would also say that it still has some catching up to do with many countries in many parts of the world that are almost at the point of being completely cashless. Same question to you there, Jolyn. Over the past 5 years, how have you seen the evolution of digital payment in Singapore?
I think immense, actually. So we do start with SGQR. That's defined as the Singapore Quick Response Code. That's introduced by MAS in 2018. That actually combines 27 payment QR codes into a single label, and that eases a lot of payment procedures here in Singapore. So that's one. In the last 2 to 3 years, we also noticed that there was a huge rise in digital wallets. We probably have around approximately 35% digital wallet penetration here in Singapore, the largest being GrabPay and ShopeePay. I remember as well in 2020, the digital wallets adoption was superb. It was landing at around 30%, and now we're projecting around like 95% in 2025. One of the key uptrends that we do see is, interestingly, the introduction of Buy Now, Pay Later, in short BNPL. That's a similar model to IPPs, which are installment payment plans by the banks. And then I think the last point was quite a good one, because today we're seeing a lot of bank transfers. So that's really done primarily through PayNow, as an interbank transfers are performed real time via PayNow here in Singapore. So that's a whole lot of things happening in the last 3 to 4 to 5 years.
I feel in Singapore there's more of a holistic approach to digital payment. And going back to this the Unified Payment QR Code, SGQR, which was launched in September 2018. Can you explain what the consumer take-up was that, particularly as we got into the pandemic?
That's a really good question. Well, I think one of the key things to be thankful for Singapore is that the government policies at that time of COVID, we were actually driving a lot of adoption via SGQR in high-touch places. So, for example, hawker centers. During the pandemic of COVID, obviously we were a lot of staying home, and a lot of us weren't really going out. And then we went into this lockdown period. What then happened was the government policies then supported the whole mobilization of SGQRs as a payment mechanism in hawker centers, in shopping malls, typically in places that a lot of consumers like yourself, myself, would actually go to. And that actually catapulted the adoption of contactless payments there.
Right. So, Steven, bringing it back to Taiwan, there was somewhat of a 4-month lockdown. But other than that, it seemed like there was a lot of movement here between consumers and sellers here. Would you say that the pandemic had limited impact on society, particularly in moving into the digital payment sphere? Did it actually affect or accelerate the growth of digital payments?
Sure. So I think the digital payment is driven by various of factors, including technology innovation, change in consumer demands, active participation from financial institutions, and also, of course, very important one, the government. So, which is with the impact of the pandemic, there's a growing preference of contactless payment methods, especially to reduce the risk of physical contact. So further accelerating the widespread adoptions of digital payments. So that's what I see. And this is something we have observed firsthand while promoting our latest product with Apple called Tap to Pay. So many small merchants that used to deal with cash only, like street vendors, individual shops, or taxis, they start receiving requests from consumer for contactless payment options. Due to pandemic.
I want to now move this to remittances, which is one of the key components of digital payments. That's the transfer of money between individuals. Take a look at this chart showing the strong preference for digital channels. In a 2023 report by Visa on digital remittance adoption, more than 50% of surveyed customers said they send or receive money using digital apps. Now, that was followed by 34% of consumers who go to a physical bank branch. Also worth noting, a fairly large group, 1 out of 10, still move money across borders by taking cash on airplanes. Now, I think that's a conversation for another day, but bringing it back down to the idea of moving money digitally, Steven, Taiwan launched its own unified payments QR code. That's the TWQR, I believe, just this past October. Rather than big waves, the impact seems to be limited. Do you feel like there will be an acceleration in uptake in its early days, or do you feel like the Taiwan consumer needs a little bit more convincing?
Sure. As mentioned, government is always the key factor in the cashless society. So in Taiwan, payment industry is going more towards cashless payment, and the government is supporting new ideas in finance and technologies. So the government is encouraging the use of technology in finance and making rules to help the cashless payment to grow. As they want payment company to offer different services to make things faster and more and help the economy, the Taiwan QR system is an example of this support. And the government also gives reward to help the companies trying out the new financial technologies. This helped them to do research and coming up with new and better ways for people to make payments.
Let's compare it to Singapore, where I feel like adoption has been quite quick or consumers have been quicker on the uptake. Jolyn, in your experience, what drives consumer adoption the most? Is it lower cost, ease of access, convenience? What would you say is the magic factor here?
I would say that there's a ton of magic factors, and initially I thought that it was COVID, but then when I kind of double clicked into these understandings of all these contributing factors over time, it seems to me like number one, I think Singapore alone, we already have a very strong baseline digitization factor. So when I look at the numbers, I think Singapore has easily 75% internet penetration. We adopted 5G technology super early in the years. We're generally pretty tech savvy ourselves, and we're familiar with mobile payments and alternative payment methods. So that's really driven by GrabPay, Shopee Pay. Next, Singapore is also a very, very strong cards market. 97% of our transactions are on cards, and cash payments have really lost ground over the last 3 to 5 years. COVID's definitely one of the facilitators in that sense. But I think really one of the studies that Visa did, and it's interesting that you pulled out some numbers, 95% or over 95% of Singaporeans, we prefer using credit to debit cards. Today, we have more than 7.7 million cards in circulation already. And then comes the governmental policies that catapulted the use of SGQR. So you can start to see a little bit of consumer behavioral shift almost that starts, we're already using cards. Then we're starting to understand and familiarize with contactless payments. Instead of physical cards, it's contactless payments. You're right, Divya. So one of the key points is really the convenience of cards versus taking and keeping cash and then counting the cash. I think we caught on really quickly with the convenience of contactless cards. That consumer preference drove increased acceptance. But I think knowing Singaporeans, the one factor that we can't run away from is the rise of e-commerce, which really helps to close that loop because in the last 5 years, we have Shopee, we have Lazada, we have live stream purchases on TikTok. All these double-digit sales periods have really, really increased the use of contactless payments and have decreased physical outlet purchasing, especially during COVID period. So I'll say a good mixture of all of these factors combined made that paradigm shift.
Stephen, I'm going to ask you a question here because as Jolyn explained, it's that convenience that people look for, and also both from the vendor point of view and the consumer point of view. In Taiwan, are you seeing the vendors being just as eager as the consumers to be offering these digital payment systems or options?
So I believe most of the payment tools are very similar level of user friendliness and cost. So I think the key factor is still the utility of scope. So you talk about merchants. So take our customers, for example, depending on the attributes of the product they sell. I think the main payment tools they need to be integrated may be varied. So consumer usage pattern may also different based on different scenarios. Sometimes changes can occur due to promotional period associated with the payment-related perks. The digital payment ecosystem in Taiwan is vast and complex, and the consumer payment behavior varies accordingly.
So a clear and present challenge to wider adoption of digital payments is the equally fast-growing security concerns like online fraud and theft. Steven Chuang looks at how companies in Taiwan are trying to get ahead of the hackers.
How many passwords do you use every day? And more importantly, how secure are those passwords? You may be surprised to know that 80% of all hacks start with password security compromise, and 81% of company data breaches are due to weak passwords.
It becomes an issue that if you only use password, it's as things that remember it's not secure enough. So, and also if the password getting more complex, and people will tend to use repeat passwords, so that's they use the password they use in the other hacks. So if it has been hacked, subsequently you will be hacking your other account too.
Hackers are the biggest threats to cybersecurity. So many big tech companies like Apple, Amazon, and Google are employing a new countermeasure to try to fend them off. And that involves doing away with the traditional password. Instead, they're opting for passkeys, which is the hot new password replacement standard.
So now it comes like vital passwordless authentication. So you don't need to use your username and password. You use your biometrics like your Face ID or your Touch ID.
Chen's company, Webcom, has been a pioneer of passwordless authentication in Taiwan. In the traditional two-factor or multi-factor authentication system, you need to type in the username and password, often followed by an OTP or one-time password through a mobile phone text message to complete the login process. But the Taiwanese company has made their multi-factor authentication process possible without keying in a single character.
Vital passwordless authentication works around a strong cryptographic key pair, like using public key and private key and biometrics. The private key is stored in your own device, which has your biometrics. Hence, only the right person and right device can complete a successful authentication. So you are free from remembering complicated password and from the risk of being hacked.
They claim that their passwordless multi-factor authentication product is simple to use and can rebuff hacking attempts. Webcom is already providing their cutting-edge technology to several Taiwanese banks and multinational companies like IKEA and Costco. But now they are looking to take their cybersecurity solutions beyond Taiwan's shores in the direction of the heavyweight markets in Southeast Asia and India.
We will establish our partner in NSBC like Thailand, Malaysia, India. We will collaborate our partner to promote our solution in this area. I want Webcom become a multicultural and globalization company.
But even though their cybersecurity solutions are tried and tested by several financial institutions and multinational corporations, experts say there are still risk factors.
All those personal identifiable information, particularly on the like biometric data, is highly sensitive. There are some recent cases, like there are some recent solutions for this kind of management, identity management and access management solutions being hacked. There is no silver bullet in the cybersecurity.
But if you are still possessive about your passwords, you may just have to bite the bullet. The Verizon 2020 data breach investigation report found that 80% of data breaches involve lost, stolen, or weak passwords, making the case for passwords to be more of a relic of the past, with passwordless authentication opening the gateway to a secure digital future. With Siwing Lin, Shubhampal for Connected.
Jolyn, what kind of conversations are you having at CardUp about security, about hackers, or about how to minimize security threats?
It's an interesting question. I think right now we're working with a couple of partners to make sure that we are pulling our weight in risk management, because sometimes it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. You know, when you start to see more payments technology, PayTech for short, we're here to disrupt the industry of payments in an attempt to make checkouts or paying so much more seamless. But sometimes it comes at a little bit of a cost. And that also means the easier it is to pay, it might also give rise to fraud or scams or even the need to relook at security measures. So that's why today at CardUp, we're working with a few partners to help to either underwrite the risk or work with white label solutions so that we look at risk on a transactional basis, or when we're actually speaking to clients, merchants, partners, we take on additional risk measures and pre-qualify that level of risk before we decide to partner with them or not.
Steven, your platform TapPay has gained a reputation among your peers in particular for its leading security features. Now, for any new technology, especially one in financial services, the crucial balance is always, as Jolyn had pointed out, ease versus ease of hacking also. So how are you dealing with that?
TapPay, our company, has been invested in fraud and AI technologies for more than 8 years. Maybe Jolyn can consider our solutions to prevent fraud. So risk associated with digital payments, including fraud, hacking, identity theft. So payment provider needs to continuously strengthen security measures to ensure the safety of consumers' funds and data. TapPay has in the AI and data technology field for more than 8 years. We collected device fingerprint data. So for each transaction, we process through thousands of data points to ensure that the transaction is safe. It's done by the genuine person, and it's done by the real person. I mean, not a robot. The Taiwanese government and TapPay are actively working to enhance the security of payment systems, that including promote diverse method of ID&V, identification verification, and applying better encryption methodology and technologies, and of course the anti-fraud technologies that we have been working on. And also, Taiwanese financial institutions emphasize consumer education to raise awareness about secure payments and the confidence in people to use the cashless payment tools.
Right. Well, one of the things that also, I guess, when a consumer is deciding to go digital is weighing the issues of security, but also is that whole mindset that, it's no longer tangible. Jolyn, consumers' concept of money is shifting. Do you also find a shift in the way companies are now selling, particularly when we talk about cash-based versus one based on credit, debt, data?
100%. Actually, it's possible for that shift, because I think today when we're looking at the way that we're paying and the way that we're perceiving payments, consumers actually have the freedom of choice to perceive it the way they want. And I think that, well, from my perspective, that the sentiment towards credit is really largely based on financial literacy of the demographic on hand. But I also feel that when we're using more data based on payments behavior, the more data that's coming from payments behavior, the more we can enable companies to use that data correctly and deliver more relevant solutions in traditionally underserved or unserved segments.
Speaking of regions, I want to take you to India for a moment. Changing spending habits and mindsets will also require innovation to support a digital economy. Now, India has built the Digital Public Infrastructure, DPI, with a view to boost economic productivity, increase financial inclusion, and support equitable growth. India's economic advisor to the G20, Chanchal Sharkar, spoke to us about the possibility of applying the DPI model to other economies, including Taiwan.
Because this digital public infrastructure were one of the key priorities of our presidency. When we introduced, not many people were aware of it, digital public infrastructure. So we did find a lot of questions and a lot of concerns, that risks, how to address those risks. It works for the countries beyond G20. That is why it is global partnership, and this group works for the entire globally for advancing financial inclusion. So therefore, these whatever work, recommendations, report, and the action plan, these are all for open for any country can come forward and take it and adopt it.
Steven, we briefly spoke about Taiwan's Unified Payment System, or TWQR. Do you think going cashless is a realistic goal for Taiwan?
Totally. It makes sense for Taiwan to embrace the cashless society. The government has been giving it strong support too. So like get back to 2015, the executive yuan has set a 90% adoption rate for the mobile payments by 2025, and I think that's a very serious commitment. And also on the user side of things, with technology developing and the society changing, more and more people are getting into digital payments.
Jolyn, Singapore has been ahead of the game, particularly in the Southeast Asian region. Do you see Singapore going completely cashless in the near future, or is this something that needs a lot more convincing to the wider population? I know young people are a lot more open to it, but with Singapore's aging population, like in Taiwan, I suppose that would be somewhat of a consideration.
That's a very interesting question, and I think it starts with hawker centers. And I would say the aging population is definitely a consideration. It's just since the pandemic, a lot of Singaporeans were almost compelled to use QR codes, contactless payments in hawker centers if they're trying to buy food or if they're checking out on the grocery stores. There was a whole period of time where we essentially stopped collecting cash. So I would say that this movement supported by the government, it reached out to all of the target segments, including the elderly. So perhaps they could have a choice of not wanting to continue using, but they had to at some point. So I would say that you essentially covered almost 80-90% of the entire population. Is this going to be continued and sustainable? I'll say yes, because digital payments, in Singapore especially, we've seen significant growth in the last 5 years. Interestingly, when you look at PayTech, payments technology as a market, we comprise of 25% of all fintechs today in Singapore. The ease of doing business is really, really strong here. And we're seeing more PayTech companies also focus on the different facets of the payment value chain. So that would provide better and better frictionless experience in the coming years.
And Steven, who's going to drive the growth towards cashless here in Taiwan? Is it the consumers, merchants, and like Jolyn was saying, that where it happens, so therefore everyone has to get on board? Or is it the banks? Who's going to be driving that move here?
So of course, TapPay is a very important part of the cashless society. And also a lot of digital wallets, the card schemes, and the governments, and also all the merchants in the market, and also the consumers.
Thank you both so much. I'm afraid we've run out of time. Steven Chuang here in Taipei, Jolyn Tay in Singapore. Thank you both so much for your time and your insight. And for our viewers everywhere, thank you for your company. If you enjoyed today's episode, or if you have any thoughts that you'd like to add to the dialogue, please visit our social media to join the conversation. Remember, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay connected.